Hello, Internet. I am your host, Zac Ricci, here for Fund&Grow's monthly YouTube Live. Supporting me today from slightly behind the camera is our IT know-it-all and head producer, Ozzy. Ozzy, say hello.
Hi guys, it's great to be here. Yeah, I'm usually just behind the scenes, but today they dragged me out.
Yeah, well, I can't do everything by myself. No, yes, he is usually behind the camera. He keeps his place running smooth. And so essentially today, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to go over a few recent developments that's happened in the world of funding, plus do a little bit of a refresher on some differences between credit types. But most importantly, what this is about answering questions from you. So if anybody in the chat has any kind of questions, whether it be about Fund&Grow, some of our recent videos, whatever's on your mind, throw those in the chat. Ozzy will send them over to me, and we'll answer those questions live here. Also, keep in mind that in, let's see, an hour and a half from now, we're going to have our monthly coaching call, our premium coaching call, for all the people who are part of the Prosperity Pulse program here with Fund&Grow. So if you're not part of that and you want to be, go look on our website, fundandgrow.com, and you'll be able to look at the premium coaching and see if that's something you want to be a part of as well. But until we get there and until those questions come in, let's start with some current news in a segment that we are officially calling, okay, yes, this is bad, but let's calm down. So first story, right at the start of the month, First Republic Bank went down as the third bank in the U.S. to fail outright this year. Now, the difference was that this time around, Chase Bank stepped in to graciously absorb First Republic to keep customers from losing out on their savings in that particular bank. So yes, a third American bank basically going under in a single year is bad. However, the thing to keep in mind is that all three of the banks that have had issues this year are all tech banks, meaning they were really just exclusively working with like the top 1% of businesses, mostly in the tech and Silicon Valley field. So chances are not only did these bank closures probably not affect you, you were probably never going to even cross paths with them unless you were specifically in Silicon Valley or tech and making like unbelievable amounts of money. The top major banks are still sitting pretty, and you've still got opportunities to build 0% interest business credit with those giant banks if you know how to go out and get it. Obviously, that's something that we specialize in. We've got lots of videos on our channel here discussing business credit and how to go about that. And I believe, if I'm not crazy, I think the three major banks or three specific banks that closed this year, I don't even know if they had business credit available. So, as a business owner, it seems scary on paper to see, three banks have closed in America. What's going to happen? But the reality of the situation is most of the banks that you would be dealing with as a business owner in this country are still unaffected. I mean, Chase was not, I'm sure, out of the kindness of their heart. I don't think they absorbed First Republic. That's just more opportunity for them to lend to more people. The other, yes, it's bad, but let's calm down story I have is on the 1st of May, 2023, Freddie Mac announced a big change to loan level price adjustment fees for new mortgages, and it's rustled a lot of feathers. The change essentially raised fees on borrowers with higher credit qualifications and lowered the fees to get a mortgage up and running for borrowers with lower credit scores and quality. So yes, mortgages suddenly charging higher fees for buyers with better credit is bad, but let's calm down. Because once you dig into the details of this whole story, the fee changes, it doesn't really change the overall loan, because lower quality credit borrowers are still going to be paying more in the long run. The interest rates are going to be, not as lucrative for them. The overall loan amounts and the time that they're going to be paying is going to be longer. So, and not to mention, whatever down payment you end up putting on the property initially is all going to have more of an effect than whatever these fees are. The changes in the fees from Freddie Mac, although they were sort of vague in their initial reasoning for it, is to Ozzy and I were talking about this yesterday, is to, I think, try to rein in some of the Wild West elements of what the housing market's been like for the last, year and a half, 2 years.
Right.
That,
to slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, because the housing market, I scream into the microphone. Yes, because the housing market really sort of started to shift with all the building and how expensive it all got, that it really kind of became an investor's market, that it was really more about like not a family trying to move into their first house. It was more like, hey, you need another investment property? Then like you're the only one that's going to be able to afford this.
Yes.
And I think this is Freddie Mac attempting to try to rein some of that in and give people who, you know, are right on the cusp of qualifying to genuinely live at a place a better chance to get in the door, and then they're going to pay for it in the long run anyway.
Right.
So, you know, long story short is the tougher profiles, the people who are struggling to kind of piece it together, they're still going to have a tougher battle in order to get a mortgage locked in. If you've got amazing credit score and great credit history and all this money to put down, they're still going to they're going to try to make it a cakewalk for you as much as they can, because ultimately they want you in that mortgage. So, as much as the shock of like, the fees are changing, it doesn't really change all that much. It's still, at the end of the day, you know, if you overqualify, you're going to more than likely get in that mortgage. If you underqualify, then it's going to be tough. Yeah. Check our chat. Make sure anyone is peeking in on us.
We haven't had anybody chime in yet. But
sad.
Not yet.
But the other
We
thing I
got
wanted to
17
mention.
viewers, though.
Okay, good. Well, thank you everybody for
Yes.
for tuning in. I appreciate that. So, you know, those were obviously our big bummer stories to start things off here. But one of the big things that we're going to be talking about in today's coaching call comes from our monthly magazine about marketing versus branding. And so, you know, we obviously go into way detail into, you know, the differences between marketing and branding. But one of the things that we've been talking about as of late is the trend back around towards mascots. Now, we don't go into super detail about mascots in this because that would be silly. But if you've noticed, if you've been on social media, TikTok, YouTube, any of these social media outlets, you've been noticing that a lot of the bigger businesses are coming back around towards mascots. And I personally think, I mean, yes, Mr. Peanut's been around since the dawn of time, but he had the weird rebirth thing where there was a baby Mr. Peanut and he came back and then there was a roast of Mr. Peanut. So, you know, mascots
Zach, I think you're kind of a mascot for Fund&Grow.
If we want to commission a like college football style mascot with my giant head, I'm fine with that. That's okay with me. Or talking stack of coins. But as of late, it feels like a lot of other companies have really gotten back into mascots. You know, for me, the first one that I noticed as of late was Duolingo, which is a language learning app that you can get on your phone. Yeah. And its logo was like a cute owl. And
friendly, harmless.
Yeah, and somewhere along the way, they decided to commission a like college football style stuffed animal looking owl mascot costume, and some person in charge of their marketing on social media, probably a younger person, took the sort of meme that was happening, that the reminder notifications from the app came across a little bit threatening, to like, hey, you better go back and learn whatever your language lesson is for today.
I noticed you haven't learned your Spanish today.
Right. They took that and ran with it. And so then it was like, oh, this mascot's like kind of feral and weird and da-da-da-da. And then, oops, now they suddenly get all the success. And then you've got Scrub Daddy, which is just, you know, a glorified sponge making company. And they have a giant mascot, and they're really
their
weird.
Stuff works.
It does. It is a great product. It also helps. It helps. Marketing is great, but it really helps if you've got a good product.
Yep. Helps me at home every night.
But then Scrub Daddy became a thing, and now there's a boatload of, like, you know, the sort of rejuvenation. And I think that also goes partly in hand with, Twitter personas of major brands, like Wendy's and some of these other major companies.
Oh, okay.
They like
how Wendy's talks trash all the time.
Right. And somebody bought somebody bought Radio Shack, and like they were using it just to push their crypto, but like it was being weird and communicating directly with people on social media, and that was garnering a lot of attention. So what I'm trying to say is, if you're a starting business, if you're just starting out, if you're still putting the building blocks together, that doesn't mean find room in your budget to go get a mascot made. But what it means is you got to remember that to grab that initial audience or to scale your audience, you're going to have to do something memorable and something that's going to stick with people, whether that's a name that's easy to remember or an interesting logo or a mascot. You have to do something that's going to hook people initially, because there's so much information happening all the time on our phones and social media. You have to stand out in some way, shape, or form. And so I just happen to have noticed that through marketing that there's been we've come back around to mascots. Do you remember it was like in the early 2000s when Burger King had like the king with the scary like mannequin face?
Oh yeah, and the game?
Yeah, well, yeah, it eventually became the games. But yeah, that was one of those things where I don't know if they test marketed it initially and they thought it was fine, but it did like a whole full circle. Because when they first dropped it, it was a nightmare. Like it's this guy in like a regal king outfit, but with like a really scary plastic dead-eyed mask. And people were like like, ugh. And then they leaned into that, and then it became like they literally had the whole campaign where like somebody's like sleeping in their bed and they roll over and there's the like scary king laying next to them and they're like, oh, and then like he had a breakfast sandwich and they were like, oh great. Like they really played into
the
like
king gets up for breakfast,
right? And so they played into, instead of going, uh-oh, this looks like a nightmare, let's try it again, let's do something else, they were just like, no, we're just going to lean into that it's a nightmare,
right?
Because it's still hooking people in, it's still capturing people's attention for them to be like, oh, I will go for Burger King for breakfast. So same kind of thing. It's like you want to stand out enough to not necessarily make waves because you don't want to get like canceled, but you want to stand out enough that it's going to hook people to go, whoa, 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 what is this?
Yeah, I think the comedic route, sometimes a little horror route, you know, that's pretty safe, and it's been working so far. So.
Yeah. It just keeps coming up as working. And it's a situation where, you know, especially like on TikTok, which who knows if it's going to be around for much longer in this country. You know, there is such a constant flood of just like jingling keys and noise and colors that whatever you can do to get people to stop and go, well, wait a minute, what was that? And rewatch it and hopefully go and buy your product. Do I have a house full of Scrub Daddy stuff? Yes, of course. We have to buy the Halloween ones and everything else.
Oh, really? They make those?
Yeah, they're one's shaped like Frankenstein's monster's head. One's like a pumpkin, like in a ghost.
Oh my goodness!
They do a good job, but they're
my
also
dishes are gonna love it.
Right. Which again, to put over Scrub Daddy, have you ever heard the origin of Scrub Daddy?
The Shark Tank thing.
Well, yeah. So when they first got started, they were trying to capitalize on mechanics as their demographic. So they had this thing where it was, you know, basically a circle sponge that if you got it wet with cold water, it like became hard as a rock, and if you hit it with warm water, it became soft, or vice versa, whatever it is. And it was like you can clean up around the garage and clean the car, and it had like the two little eye holes.
Is there really like a science behind that thing?
Yeah.
No, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's not just like a sponge. It has like, it's got different properties that like if you have it wet with cold water, I think it's hard, and then if it's hot water, it gets soft. So when you're doing the dishes, it's soft, but if you're like cleaning a counter, it can have like a little more durability
to it. If I'm doing the dishes and my hot water runs out, and
and then it's guess what? Now you're scraping off the porcelain of your nice plates, of your good china. But when it first got started, it just had the two holes to like clean your fingies when you were like getting grease on them or whatever, and then it didn't work, and
poking
so
the poor guy in the eyes.
Yeah, so then they added the mouth so that you could, like if you had big spoons, you could clean the spoons through it. And once they did that, and they shifted from automotive to kitchen and countertops and things like that, suddenly that was it.
Holy moly! So you just feed the guy and
So another lesson to be taken from Scrub Daddy is know when to jump ship. Not too often, because I've had that problem before where business owners are like, hey, this didn't work in the first 15 minutes, I'm out of here. You're going to have to give things time. But they had enough wherewithal to go, okay, we know the product works, we know it's good, but we're not hitting the right demographic yet. And we actually talked about in a couple of upcoming videos, as well as the magazine for this month, talking about not trying to sell to the entire market, but finding your specialized market that you can really focus on. Because, you know, as great as Scrub Daddy is, and, you know, it's a hit with young people because of TikTok and all that, like, if they had stuck with automotive and then been like, well, eventually we'll reach everybody, they would have gone nowhere. They would have eventually, sold out to probably Armor All or something like that. But instead, they stuck to their guns. They went, all right, let's just shift it to this instead. Cut a little smiley face in it. There you go. And
now it belongs in your home.
Right. And then once you've got that, once you're in, then you start figuring out, okay, how do we make slight changes to the product to get people to buy again. And that's when you suddenly go from, you've got the scrub daddy, then you have the scrub mommy, then you've got the sad scrub daddy with a frowny face. Isn't that fun? Da 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 da. And now, next thing you know, you walk down an aisle in any store. Yeah, you walk down like a Walmart or a Target aisle, and there's like a whole end cap that's just different scrub daddy products. So, again, it was that knowing when to shift your focus and when to stick to your guns, and they bet on the right horse. They really nailed it.
Didn't they not get any funding from
Shark Tank? Because I don't know this for sure. I think they were still in the automotive stage on Shark Tank, and it just didn't work. And then they were like, huh. So then they focused and did their own thing. Because
did one of the guys buy it?
Eventually, yeah, I think so. But like the Magic Eraser story, similar in terms of like, oh, I found this foam, and it is like, basically the most fine focused sandpaper basically in a sponge, and then they went on Shark Tank and eventually just sold right to Mr. Clean, and now Magic Erasers are a thing. So that could have been the story for Scrub Daddy, but instead they were like, well, fine, we'll figure it out, we'll rethink it, and now it's like the biggest thing, which is so funny to have, brand awareness and brand specificity and favoritism in a cleaning sponge product.
Exactly.
But again, the lesson to be learned there is know when to shift and focus on which demographic is not going to buy from you just once, but continuously buy. And that's what they found. And now, it's not just like, oh, stay-at-home parents are using Scrub Daddies, but like everybody does now. Because it's just like, oh, it's a good product, but maybe the silliness, maybe the mascot, whatever, brought you in.
Yeah, exactly.
And now, because I remember seeing Scrub Daddy just in stores and being like, oh, interesting, but my wife was already on TikTok seeing it like, oh, these are the greatest thing. Like, they have this giant one that they roll through their office and stuff and all this other silly stuff. And so that it's the things that stick in your head.
Yeah. But as a dad, they do scrub.
Right. No, they again,
scrub good.
Again, the other lesson to learn is have a good product. Yes. Like if whatever your service or product is, make sure it's of quality, because if you have a great marketing campaign, but whatever item you have sucks, then where do we go from here?
Put in the R&D and make sure it's
exactly, awesome. Exactly. Now, the other thing, and again, we're going to go in more detail on our coaching call with our vice president, Amanda Webster, will be in to have this discussion with me. But one of the major topics that we talk about is marketing versus branding, because the difference is marketing is what we're talking about here, a sales technique or a sales pitch or a logo or mascot, something that brings people to the door. But the branding is what is the building initially. What are the standards and the beliefs of the company initially. That is what the branding is. It's not just like, we all have shirts with the logo on it. Like, the branding is like, what is the core value of the company? And that should basically remain solid. And then the marketing can shift with the tides. Right. Another thing is you can't just stick with the same thing forever. If you just marketing to the same group or the same style or whatever the case is, then eventually it's going to dry up. So you have to be willing to shift with the tides when it's necessary.
Well, that's how people have adapted over the years. People don't have like the attention span they used to.
True.
Kids now, getting them to sit down and actually watch a movie beginning to end, that's a struggle.
Right.
But they're scrolling on TikTok and they're consuming those little tiny videos.
Right. And the algorithms and all that.
Getting bombarded by advertisements, but they don't care. It's just next one.
So let me ask you this. I don't know if this is going to reflect great on us or not, but what is a marketing campaign that you remember as a kid like that really stuck with you?
Purple ketchup. That's
I remember the purple ketchup.
First thing that comes to mind.
Yeah,
purple ketchup. And then like any kind of jingle.
Yes.
I think
I remember the jingle for Crossfire, which I've actually played that board game, and it is not good. It was like a little sort of air hockey, but it was like with a marble thing, but it had a really great, it was like, you get caught up in the crossfire. Like, it was a great jingle and super obnoxious. And it was just like, this is a hokey, it was like Hungry Hippos. This is a hokey game, but the jingle works. That's like one of the first ones that sticks out in my mind from when I was a kid.
But then you got like jingles where it's like 877 cash now.
Right, yeah.
Like, wow.
Which again, it's sometimes it's about sticking to the bit. Because yeah, the 877 Cash Now, which is like basically like a law firm that'll get your cash settlement. It'll expedite your cash settlement. Essentially, they cut you a check for whatever the lump sum is, and then they get the monthly payments or whatever, however they work.
Call J.G. Wentworth.
Yeah, J.G. Wentworth. Yeah, it started with like kind of a weird jingle, and then that's what people talked about, and then the commercials became kind of meta, and it was about just the jingle.
Yeah.
If something works, make sure you capitalize on it. That's kind of what you learn from J.G. Wentworth is, if there's something that's working for
Just
you,
capitalize it, run with it.
Yeah, basically run with it until it stops making money.
Run it into the ground.
I mean,
You hit gold,
Well, how many times did like Progressive Auto Insurance do that?
Yeah.
Like the Cavemen, the Gecko, for Geico, Flow, like all these mascots and concepts and bells and whistles, they just run it into the ground because you have to keep that attention. You got to keep that audience attention for as long as you can. So the other thing I wanted to mention as well is, in some of the videos that we've been producing and things like that, one of the big questions that we keep getting is about the difference between business and corporate credit. And so that is one of our absolute fundamentals here. And one of those, without like putting the tinfoil on, one of those issues that we see people run into is not a lot of companies really express that there's a difference between business and corporate credit. And there's various reasons for that. A, it's a little complicated. B, it kind of makes for a fun sales pitch to kind of put them in together. But basically at the core, they are different ideas. So you've got your personal credit. So this is going to be my little like baby professor crash course here. So you've got your personal credit, which, obviously is tied to your social security number. You're hopefully doing the best you can in terms of making good payments and having a good variety of accounts. Maybe you've got a mortgage on it. You've got your credit cards, et cetera, et cetera. That reports on your personal side. There's the 3 credit bureaus. Hip, hip, hooray. Now, there is also a separate type of credit that we call business credit. And those are credit card accounts that are specifically linked to major banks that do not reflect on your social security number and as such don't reflect on the personal credit. Instead, they would reflect on your tax ID number. So, you have a bouncing baby business, they have a tax ID number as their identifying number for the government, blah, 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 blah. That's what true business credit reflects to instead of your social security number if you're doing it the right way. There are a couple of banks out there that have business cards that reflect on personal. Capital One, Discover. They claim to be business, but they're not really because they're reflecting on the personal side. So if you're running up charges for your business and then making big payments, you don't want it reflecting on the personal. So banks like Bank of America, Chase, U.S. Bank, American Express, they all offer business credit cards that reflect on the tax ID instead of your social. They're great. There is actually a third type of credit, and that is your corporate credit. Now, corporate credit primarily runs through a service called Dun & Bradstreet. And essentially what it is it is a completely separate form of funding that is based entirely on your willingness to work with other businesses. So, for example, instead of like on your personal credit, your credit score is based on like, hey, are you making good payments? Are you paying things on time? Are you charging too much? What are you doing? Corporate credit with Dun & Bradstreet is based on, okay, what vendors are you working with? Are you buying anything from them? Are you paying them back in an agreed upon time frame? 30 days, 60 days, whatever. That's what it's based on. Not based on your social, not based on necessarily your tax ID. It's just based on your willingness to work with these other vendors. So that can seem kind of superfluous at first. People go, well, do I really need this type of credit? I've got business credit cards. What's the benefit of using corporate credit? Well, the benefit of corporate credit is that it's completely non-recourse. So if you are using corporate credit and something bad happens and you can't make payments anymore or something like that, there's nothing that can come back on you from corporate credit. Don't get me wrong, they're going to take you off the Christmas card list. They're not going to be thrilled with you, right. But there's nothing that they can reflect on you because it is completely non-recourse. But in addition to that, you're dealing with vendors and other business services that can be a benefit to your company. So, for example, Bank of America gives you a business credit card for $15,000. Wonderful. You now have $15,000 you can spend however you need to spend to better your business. Great. Corporate credit would maybe give you something like, hey, here's a $30,000 account with Office Depot. Now, that doesn't mean you get to go out and spend 30 grand wherever you want, but if you have just opened up a new office and you need a ton of office supplies, desks, chairs, computers, the whole nine yards, now suddenly you have this like 30 grand waiting for you with Office Depot, and instead of like making little monthly payments, maybe it's you pay it every 60 days. Okay. So then it's like, okay, you can charge up what you need and then pay it off in 60 days, and then boom, swish, you're good. That is what we're talking about with corporate credit. Those kind of like, you're not just building like a card, you're almost building relationships with these other companies. And it can be a variety of things. Gemplers, Uline shipping, if you're doing a lot of like e-commerce or Etsy and you're like mailing stuff out of the house, having something with Uline shipping could be hugely beneficial to you. Amazon, and then eventually, if you work on corporate credit long enough, you'll go beyond just vendor trade lines, and eventually you can start getting corporate loans, where instead of like having to put up collateral or sign your life away, instead it's all built on this foundation, these relationships that you've built with other vendors. So now you're going, okay, I need a company car. You could do that with corporate credit. Or you could go on the top of the mountain like we have, and you can go, I need a building. I've got almost 70 employees. I need a building.
Right.
You can do that through corporate credit, and that's what our company did. The building that we are both sitting in right now was bought using corporate credit.
And the collateral is the relationship with the
exactly. It's your the foundation that you've built is your collateral in that case. Okay. But like our boss, our CEO, Ari Page, did not sign specifically like, hey, Ari owes this, to get this building. It was all done through corporate credit.
Gotcha. Based
off of the strength of Fund&Grow, and we've been doing this for a million years and blah, 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 blah. So that is sort of the apex. That is the end goal for corporate credit, is to truly have funding available for your business that you are not solely responsible for or not completely on the hook for. Not to say like, and then you can go to Vegas, but like the concept of, oh, this goes beyond just me as the individual.
Right.
Now, to go back to the very beginning of this thought, that once you find out what these things are, business credit are business credit cards from major banks, corporate credit is vendor relationships with these other companies. Once you hear that, you go, oh yeah, those are two totally different things. Mm-hmm. But they're both for your business. They both deal with credit. So a lot of places will just sort of lump them together as one big thing. But they're not. Right. Because there are certain elements that you can kind of estimate on with corporate credit that you can't with business credit. What I'm saying is, if Ozzy was like, hey, I want to start building corporate credit. Okay, great. Got your business set up and running, great. If you listen to people who know what they're doing with corporate credit, you could have access to, let's say 60 grand in 45 days. Without even looking at your personal credit, I could say that, because that's how corporate credit works. If you work on the system the right way, you can have that amount of money in about that amount of time. Conversely, if you were like, hey, I have a business, I want to start getting business credit cards, I have no idea what your personal credit looks like, so I can't give you a realistic estimation right off the rip of like, well, you'll probably get 60 grand in 45 days, because for all I know, you filed bankruptcy 10 minutes ago. Right. So you can't really make that kind of promise. So some companies merge these two types of credit ideas together in order to make the fancier sales pitch. Because I can go, hey, I'll get you business-related credit in 45 days. How much? Oh, probably about 60 grand. Oh, but you don't know what my credit looks like. I know things. Could be talking about corporate credit. Mm-hmm. So that's one of those things where of all, I've been here almost 11 years now. I have never seen a company explain the difference like that out front. Everyone just kind of goes, it's credit for your business, and leave it at that. But they are separate ideas.
Yeah, and it's different.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I laughed with my wife about this. I loved AC/DC, the band AC/DC, when I was a kid. And everybody always says like, oh, wow, they were so lucky that they found like a lead singer that sounded like their first lead singer who died. And if you actually listen to them, you're like, they don't sound anything alike.
Yeah.
But the songs all basically sound the same. So it all comes out in the wash. So same kind of thing. It's like, oh, but they're both just credit for your business. Well, yes, but when you go in the details of it, there's nuance, there's differences here. And in addition to, vendors that are like sending you something tangible, there's a D&B vendor called, I believe it's Creative Analytics, I think is the name of the company. And what they do is they will do, they'll do tangible items. So if you have like, I want like shirts with my emblem on or something, they can do that. But they also do marketing strategies and business plans, and they can help you like develop what you're doing as well. So it's not all just tangibles. And the corporate funding offer that we have in this month is Summa Office Supplies. And so they were a women-owned business that's located in Sherman Oaks, and they do like all kinds of different office supplies, customization, things like that. And that's just one that you could build with corporate credit if you know what you're doing. And that's something that Fund&Grow does offer information on. But yeah, so essentially, the point of all that is that there are different types of funding available to business owners, but it comes down to really knowing the right path to take. And we talked about earlier about the constant inundation of information and content that's online. There's a lot of people who will just say like, oh, just Google, business credit applications and start filling some stuff out. But if you do that, chances are, A, you probably won't get approved, especially if you're just throwing your credit all over the place.
Willy-nilly.
And B, if you do get approved, it's probably not going to be for the highest amount you could be approved for. It's about going in with a real plan in place, and that's kind of where Fund&Grow comes in. That's we are a service that does help with that. We've been dealing with credit forever and ever, and banks for the longest time, so we have a better idea of what they're looking for. And so having that kind of insight can be a huge difference maker. And so if anyone's on this call, I know there's plenty of people who are watching our YouTube videos and things like that, and of course we thank you for that. But if there's anybody out there who has been hesitating to get started on building your business, both financially and scaling it, I would say give Fund&Grow a look. We've got an amazing team of people here, and we specialize in really presenting you in the best possible way to the banks so that you're getting the kind of results that you want. Because there's nothing more frustrating than, hey, I'm right on the cusp of like my business exploding. I just need 20 grand and I'll be good. And then going out and applying for something, and it's like, hey, I got 2 grand, wonderful, and that's it.
Yeah.
And little did you know, if you had gone to this bank, or if you had, presented it in this way, then they would have given you that money and then some. So it's something to keep in mind that, for as much as there's a DIY spirit to being a business owner, there is also a huge benefit to hiring the right people. Quentin Tarantino mentioned that once, that a great director is not someone with a vision. A great director is someone who knows the best people to bring in on the project so that they can make the vision happen. Yeah. And I think there's an element to that in all business ownership, that it's about really, bringing in the right team to get where you need to go, as opposed to I'll just do it all myself and then getting frustrated and quitting halfway through.
I can really resonate with that, because I try to do everything, literally everything by myself, here and at home.
Right.
Like I want to host every single server that we have at Fund&Grow here in this building, but there are some things that
it's a little bit beyond that pay grade.
Yeah. And it's not a pay grade thing. It's more a there's certain fallbacks that you can fall on. Like if something goes down, it's not on like you to fix it. It's you have like a whole team of people behind this company.
Yeah, you want a support structure basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of
so there's kind of like a blame game.
Yes, very true.
But, at the end of the day, it is my fault if something goes down. But
that is the risk. Yeah,
there's a
but there's also an element of security to that.
Yeah,
and I don't mean like literal security. I mean like feel better security.
Yeah,
of being like, as soon as you start bringing in a lot of people into a project, it gets exponentially more complicated from there. And even if it's something just like, hey, we got to have a meeting, and it's like, well, that's a lot easier when it's 2 people versus if it's like 50 people. Then it's like, well, is everybody's schedule's going to equal? So there is a certain level of security blanketness to I'm just going to run it myself. I'll worry about it. If it goes bad, it's on me.
Yeah.
But if it goes well, it's on me because I can trust me.
Yeah.
So learning to trust, I think, is one of those big elements. Well, of course, I should hope. So that is I think that is an obstacle that a lot of business owners have to deal with is learning to trust other people and learning to hand off certain responsibilities to other people that are competent.
Yep. That comes with having the right team.
Yeah, exactly. And
having good communication between, your expectations and then the job that is actually given to you.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. There was a training that I went to I would say probably 144 years ago when I first started here. And that was one of their big things that they mentioned as like from a managerial point of view, that the biggest issue that people have is a lack of awareness of what their responsibilities truly are. Because every job, like there's like on paper what the job is supposed to be, and then there's in practice what the job is. And so for a lot of people in like managerial and ownership positions, lack of showcasing what another person's box of responsibility is usually a catalyst for like the most problems. When you're unclear about like, this is what you're in charge of, this is what you have to worry about, is this, and this. If you can be that open and be that clear in your communication, it's going to end up, saving you in the long run because you're going to have less turnover, you're going to have less burnout. I mean, it's not magic. It's not, people are still going to be working hard and stressing out. But the concept is by clearly defining, your team's responsibilities, it's only going to benefit you. Now, is that going to stop people from going above and beyond? No, I think there's still some human nature to want to go above and beyond, especially if there's like monetary value attached to it. But it's going to, at least for the people who worry and the people who put too much on themselves, clearly defining their responsibilities is going to help limit that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key to any kind of, as soon as you start getting lots of people involved in your team, I think that's the number one thing you have to worry about. It's like, okay, let's clearly define what everybody's responsibilities are, because otherwise then you've got people who maybe are overlapping, which is always super frustrating. If you're working on something and then somebody else rolls in like, oh, I did half that, and you're like, hey, what's my job? So to try to steer clear of that, I think clearly defining and updating those responsibilities. If it's like, hey, it was 6 months and yeah, you used to be in charge of this, but now we want you in charge of this, that's fine. That's the nature of the beast. But taking the time to clearly define that sort of thing.
At the same time, it's really hard to define all of that because there's so many moving pieces to like a business, and especially if you're like a small company, like what Fund&Grow is.
Right.
I'm speaking from experience here. It's hard to define every single role for every single thing because there's a lot.
That's true.
To support.
That's true, and there's a lot of hats being worn. You know, in terms of like, yeah, you're in charge of this, but also sometimes maybe this, and that sort of thing. And our company specifically, we've been very comfortable with moving people around. Some people, it'll kind of come through in the experience that they're having, that they've got a speciality in a certain type. Maybe it's somebody who was initially brought in as like a negotiator with the banks. Maybe they have like really great customer service skills. And it's like, ooh, do we still want to use this where they only use that like 25% of the time? Or do we move them to more of a processing role, or maybe like an incoming role where it's like they're immediately hitting new people with that great customer service skill set. So that does make it tough as well. And I think on the opposite side, like we talked about, like from the managerial side, from the top down, you should be clearly defining this. From the bottom up, you should also be expecting that there's going to be outliers. Like even when it's like, all right, this is what I'm responsible for, A, B, C, and D. Well, there's a whole rest of the alphabet, and that is going to come up. That happens with me with the content that we make for YouTube. Like theoretically, it's like, well, I'm really only in charge of one major video on Wednesdays. If you don't watch them already, please do. And short form content basically every other day of the week. And it's like, well, yes, that's technically on paper what I'm responsible for, but sometimes there's internal videos. Sometimes there's, we have to edit this, or maybe there's an interview or a podcast or whatever the case is. So that does come with the territory.
There's some flexibility that's always
I think you have to expect that to a certain degree. And I don't know the right way to pitch that from a managerial point of view.
Yeah.
Like to be like, here is your clearly defined box of responsibilities, but also maybe there's some other wild nonsense that might come in every once in a while. Sorry in advance. Like,
Yeah.
But then again, that's honesty, and I think because you know. So let's see. So we're both. Are you technically a Gen Z or are you a millennial?
Good question. I'm 1995, so
I'm gonna go with you're an infant. You're a
Yeah.
little baby boy.
I don't know. All my siblings are younger, so I'm the oldest of. So
Okay.
I think I'm a Zoomer. You know,
Okay.
I clump myself with like my little brother.
So I'm technically
Yeah.
considered a millennial, and you know the big there's a lot of pushback in terms of like our sort of age demographic in terms of work ethic and workforce and all that, and I think a lot of that comes down to communication.
Yeah.
That it's like, you know, on the managerial side, don't be offended if a Zoomer or whatever comes in and goes like, well, I want to know exactly how much I'm making in a year. And you go, oh, I can't believe you'd ask that. Like, okay, expect that might be a thing.
Yeah.
But then conversely, for that younger generation, be prepared that for as well defined as a job description may be, there should always be an element of yes and improv.
Mm-hmm.
You should be prepared to kind of run with that at any point.
Yeah.
Because just digging your heels in and being like, is not going to help if everyone does that. Eventually, you're going to have to go, okay, yeah, let's figure out how we make this work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a huge part of IT specifically.
Yes. We always have to, adapt,
Right.
put out fires.
Right.
It comes with the territory.
Yeah, and that's all right. That's something that comes with I think every job really. If you really break it down, every job should have an element of improv and all right, let's make it work. So double check both chats, by the way. There's 2 on there.
2 chats.
Yeah, there's 2 chats. I've had to do this job. So there's the regular, and then there's yeah, you're on top chat right now. So go
Okay.
to there's a drop down menu there at the top.
This one?
Nope, that's definitely not a drop down menu.
Mm.
Slightly further up, right there.
Top chat?
Uh-huh.
Bottom chat.
If there's like 187 comments on here
Yeah,
and
I'm
we
just-
haven't, no, we're fine.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
So bottom
just
line
not in
here,
Just yet.
closing thoughts. Especially with our 2 bummer stories to start things off here,
Mm-hmm.
it can certainly feel like on a financial point of view that things are kind of a mess right now, and to a certain degree they kind of are. But the main thing to take away is whether it be the weird tech banks closing or whether it be mortgage fees going up or you not getting the kind of returns on a marketing campaign that you were hoping for. It's like you said perfectly, Ozzy. It's knowing when to adapt and when to shift your focus and when to go, okay, so that's not working exactly how we want it to. So where do we go from here? So for instance, if you're worried about the banks, closing kind of thing, like, what if that happens to one of the bigger banks? Well, more than likely that wouldn't. But then the answer would be to diversify where you're putting your money.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, and I don't mean Bitcoin, for instance, I've had Bank of America for a bajillion years. Since I was like in high school, I've been with Bank of America. And so I'm sure there's people in the audience that are like, boo, they're not great. They get the job done. But recently I switched over I took some of my money and I put it into a different bank because I was like, okay, this one has slightly better interest rates, but I didn't completely go like, bye, and like leave Bank of America altogether,
Right.
but diversifying where I'm putting my money and where I'm using
We
my
still
money.
got bills coming out of those.
Right, of course, and
Yeah.
then direct deposit and all that. But the idea is to diversify what you're doing in terms of funding. So maybe the answer is if thus far for your business you've been running through your own personal assets. Let's say you just you're going paycheck to paycheck and you're dumping half of it into your side gig, which you hope to become a full-time job. Then maybe business credit is an answer to that. Maybe getting some business credit where you can separate your business and personal spending. Maybe that's enough to give you the leg up. The point is that with so many variables and so many things sort of up in the air in regards to, financing and credit and everything else that's going on, the ability to adapt is your strongest asset now. That is what ultimately you have to focus on is, okay, doesn't mean throw everything out and start from scratch, but if there are elements of your business or your financial situation that are not working how you want them to, then now is the time to adapt and shift and go, okay, where can I go from here? Is it business credit? Is it different side gig? Is it turning a side gig into a full-time job? Is it making that leap? Whatever the difference is, whatever the decision is, that is what you can do. You can either sit in a ball and cry because things are weird in terms of financing right now, or you can go, where do we go from here? And one thing that I remember hearing a long, long time ago is the true superpower. I came up amending on this. The true superpower of Batman is not the money or the gadgets; it's the contingency plans. Batman always has contingency plans. So if you want to be like Batman and go like, okay, where is my next step? You got to have contingency plans. You got to have backups for backups and go, okay. And I know you do it for IT because it's like, here's our main server, here's our backup server if need be. That's a contingency plan. It's about having the contingency plan to go, okay, this marketing campaign's not going how I want, so we're going to shift to this. Or, okay, this bank is not giving me what I want in terms of whatever with my money. Okay, do I shift to a different bank? Do I spread this out a little
Disaster
more?
recovery.
Right. It's about contingency plans. So that's always stuck with me. And so with all that being said, thank you all so much for joining us here on our monthly live. As always, we greatly appreciate the support and any kind of feedback. If you haven't already, please go check out our videos for this month so far. We've been having a great focus on online businesses and e-commerce, which I know is like the most popular genre of business these days. So we've been doing a lot of videos focusing on that. And if you are a member of our premium coaching and the Prosperity Pulse, we will start our monthly private call at 3:30. Next month, we're going to be pushing it, I think, to 4:30. But this month, we're still doing 3:30. I will be joined by our vice president here, Amanda Webster, and we will be going way deeper into this month's issue, as well as obviously answering your questions and all that about marketing and branding. And so, yeah, for everybody here, as always, on behalf of Ozzy, who did an amazing job as producer, I am Zac Ricci. Thank you so much for joining us here at Fund and Grow, and we will see